Welcome to CA Zambia, Financial Management D2. My name is Lloyd Halubili. Okay, in this presentation, we're going to look at competences and learning outcomes. We're also going to look at common mistakes made by students. Then we're going to look at exam answering techniques. And when it comes to exam answering techniques, we're going to consider two practical examples where we're going to look at how you develop a marking key and an answer plan. Well, once we look at exam answering techniques, we're also going to look at future expectations. Okay, so here's an overview of today's presentation. D2 Financial Management is part of the Zika taxation, diploma taxation program, and is comprised of 6 modules. Once the 6 modules are attempted, a student is awarded a diploma. And the topics covered in D2 Financial Management include financial planning and analysis, sources of finance, cost of capital, capital investment appraisal, valuation principles, and group accounts, among other topics. The paper is a 3-hour exam session, and includes 15 minutes reading time. Okay, so let's look at the first item in our presentation, learning objectives and outcomes. So what are the learning outcomes for D2? The paper is comprised of about 7 units. Each unit is made up of subtopics referred to as elements. So the first one deals with financial management. The second one deals with accounting ratios. The third one deals with sources of finance. The fourth one deals with the cost of capital. The fifth one deals with investment appraisal. Other topics also include business valuation and working capital management. Okay, so let's look at 1 or 2 units in detail so that you have a feel of the syllabus. As students, you are expected to cover the whole syllabus. So here is a detailed syllabus. The first unit regarding framework of financial management has topics such as the purpose of financial management, and there's also financial objectives and the relationship with corporate strategy.
Unit 1, let's do it again.
Okay. Okay, so let's look at the syllabus in detail. Unit 1 covers the framework of financial management. Under the framework of financial management, we have topics such as the nature and purpose of financial management, financial objectives and how they relate to corporate strategy. We also have other topics such as objectives of not-for-profit organization. There's also Unit 2, which looks at ratio analysis and how you can predict financial statements and anticipate corporate failure. Okay, so moving to other units. Unit 3 covers sources of finance. Take a look at the elements. Unit 4 covers cost of capital. Under that unit, you are expected to familiarize yourself with how to estimate the cost of equity, the cost of debt, and then from those two, how you derive the weighted average cost of capital. Also included in this unit are capital structure theories. Okay, let's move on to Unit 5. Continuing with the detailed syllabus. Unit 5 covers investment appraisal techniques, and in this module of the syllabus, you have discounted cash flow techniques, and then how you factor in inflation and taxation in investment appraisal. Following this unit is valuation principles and group accounts. Okay, If I can just repeat myself, following the valuation principles and group accounts, which is comprised of about 6 elements. This is one of the modules that's integrated and generally is challenging for the students because it's corporate finance and financial accounting. It covers topics such as valuation of shares, principles of group accounts, and then preparation of financial statements for an associate, and how you deal with inter-group transactions. Okay, so let's move on to the last unit in the syllabus. Unit 7, working capital management. Covers working capital and how you manage elements of working capital such as inventories, receivables, accounts payable, and cash. Okay, so that's basically the syllabus. Okay, so let's look at common mistakes made by students. These can be summarized in about 5 areas. Inability to cover the whole syllabus and poor time management, failure to identify relevant cash flows, inability to compute the cost of capital, inability to compute the capital allowances, and inability to look at other non-financial factors. So I'll look at some of the general problems that we have in these 6 areas. Okay, so poor syllabus coverage and time management. Generally, students, this is one of the largest contributing factors to failure. Students fail to attempt the required number of questions because they specialized or they did not cover the whole syllabus, or the topics that they covered did not turn up in the exam. So this is the biggest contributing factor, and generally students whose coverage of the syllabus is poor normally tend to answer questions very poorly, and they write very little. So, and obviously with the consequence that they cannot pass the exam. So students are strongly advised to cover the whole syllabus, basically. Okay, moving on to the next one. Failure to identify relevant cash flows. Students need to look at the case studies given and determine from the cash flows whether the cash flows are a perpetuity or an annuity, because not doing so will generally result in a wrong answer, wastage of time, and loss of marks. If cash flows are an annuity for 15 years, students who don't understand the cash flows will end up preparing an answer that might take them more than the required time. If, say, it's 15 or 20 years, that would probably take 2 pages. But if the students use an annuity, you'll be able to cover the question within a short period. Next, moving on to the next common error, inability to compute the cost of capital. The cost of capital is not a given. Students have to be familiar with asset beta and how it's de-geared to arrive at how it's de-geared and re-geared to arrive at the equity beta. Not having this knowledge would generally result in an incorrect weighted average cost of capital. This is one of the most problematic areas under the cost of capital, and students are well advised to familiarize themselves with the concept of the asset beta and the equity beta. Moving on to the next problem. Failure to compute capital allowances. Capital allowances can be derived using 2 methods, the reducing balance method or the straight line method. Students should not assume that the applicable method will always be the straight line method. Read the question and then apply the appropriate method. Next, I would like to talk about the inability for students to evaluate working capital. Generally, students have a poor knowledge. Generally, students have poor knowledge of receivables and cash management in this area. Students need to familiarize themselves with factors that affect working capital, such as identifying the costs and benefits related to factoring, and then comparing them with the current policy in order to advise whether the current policy needs to be maintained or the receivables should be factored. Okay, and finally, inability to, one of the common errors is the inability to look at non-financial factors. So the scenarios will normally include non-financial factors, and these should normally be discussed to earn the full marks allotted to the questions. Other common mistakes, for just general information, take a look at some of these which are rare but also quite relevant, which might include not addressing the question which has been asked, or not attempting parts of the question that require discussion. Okay, so what we're going to do now, we're going to look at two past papers so that we can familiarize ourselves with the required answering techniques. So this question is drawn from the first question is December 2018 was the fourth question. So this is a theory question. I'll look at the theory question, and then I'll also look at a question that looks at computations. Okay, so this particular question was on mostly sources of finance. So part A of the question required students to identify the sources of finance that are valuable to SMEs in Zambia and carried 10 marks. The second part required computation of goodwill and non-controlling interest. So these two parts carried 20 marks. The final part of this question carried five marks and required discussion of the advantages of listing a company on Luce. So let's take a look at, I think I need to repeat that. Yeah. The final question required students to discuss the merits of listing a company on Luce. In the next few slides, I'll look at how this question could have been attempted and some of the aspects that the students should have dealt with. Okay, so this is how you would analyze or break down the question. So obviously, for part A, you need to identify the area of the syllabus, which is sources of finance, which is element 4 in the syllabus. And the question is asking for, the key words is evaluate. Yeah. Evaluation requires discussing the pros and cons of the sources of finance. So don't just look, the mistake would just be to take one view, just look at the merits, you do not look at the demerits. Evaluation is an inclusive word. It means look at both sides of the question. Take an opposing view and a supportive view. In short, part B required valuation, usage of valuation principles and group accounts, and it's drawn from element 5. The word is compute. The keyword there is compute, basically meaning calculate. Part C required an explanation of the sources of finance, and it's drawn from element 2. So you basically, the key idea here is that you need to look at the keywords. What is the requirement? Decide from the keywords, decide the level of detail that is required in the answer.
Whether you're laying down foundations for your business or restructuring market goals, it's important to have professionals that you can trust. Chartered accountants are key to business growth to help you bring your ventures to the world. That's why you should make sure you have a CA Zambia on board. CA Zambia is a globally recognized chartered accountancy qualification that ensures our chartered accountants uphold international standards and stay informed on the best accounting practices worldwide. Keep your business growth healthy. Go with a CA Zambia certified accountant. CA Zambia, developing business leaders.
I'll analyze the question further in the next slide. Okay, so this is how you develop an answer plan. Having looked at the keywords, which was evaluate, calculate, and explain. So the next thing you need to do is you need to plan how much time you should spend on the question. The question is a 25-mark question. So you know that there are 4 questions, so which means each question requires 45 minutes. Yeah. So the way you decide on how you allocate time to each part of the question is basically can be computed as follows. You know that it's a 3-hour exam. 3 hours means 3 times 60 minutes, 180 minutes, and the exam carries 100 marks. So if you want to find out how many minutes for each mark, so it's 100 into 180. So it's about 1.8 minutes per mark. So part A, for instance, had 10 marks. So you can allocate 1.6 times the 10 marks, that would give you 16 minutes. The point 2, which normally would take the 1.8 to 1.8, is normally allotted for planning. So you can use 1.8 minutes per mark. So approximately about 16 minutes for part A, since it carried 10 marks. Part C as well carried 10 marks, so that is 1.6 times 10, that's 16 marks. And then the last part carried 5 marks, so 1.6 times 5, that's 8 marks. So the total should come up to 45 minutes. So this is a rough guide that's generally used in the ref kits for assigning time to the questions. Okay, so having done that, you now can basically look at the detailed question. Okay, so I'll move on and look at another question that deals with computations. This is drawn from December 2015. This was the second question. This required, this is based on ratio analysis. So it's a standard ratio analysis question that you'd find in D2 financial management and other financial management papers under the Zika program. So ratio analysis, normally you're given some benchmark data, which might include some ratios for the industry, as highlighted on the slide. You also would include other bits of data that are normally given, include the balance sheet and the income statement, which are outlined in the following slides. Okay, so there is the income statement. The income statement will be for the company that is being analyzed. It might be for 2 financial years, or it might be an income statement for the company that is being analyzed and the competing company, or average figures for the industry. Okay, let me look at the balance sheet as well. So the balance sheet as well covers 2 financial years. So these are called comparatives. the idea is to compute ratios for 2 years and then see increments. So the approach to dealing with ratios has to include, it normally starts with a development of an appendix where these tables are outlined, as I'll show in the following slides. Okay, so basically, this is how my answer plan would be. Basically, I would look at the requirements that are outlined in the question, the verbs required. Part A is requiring a comparison, part B is requiring a discussion, so the keyword is discussion, then part C is requiring explanation. So look at the area being tested in the syllabus. Ratio analysis falls under planning and analysis. Okay, so put your mind in that frame that you're looking at ratio analysis. And then, so in terms of how the key deliverable would be a report. The question requires a report. It says, prepare a report including the following: comparison of the current financial performance of the company to that of the industry, discussion of the gearing and interest cover of woodwork engineering, explanation of advantages of financing machinery using an issue of ordinary shares. So the major deliverable is a report. The report has to include an appendix which will have comparative ratios, either comparing performance in 2018 versus performance in 2019, or performance for woodwork engineering with the industry or a competing company, if that, as would be the case in other questions. Normally, you'll be provided with either industry benchmark data or a competing company. And then, of course, the report should include a conclusion. Okay, so this is how the appendix looks like. So you have the ratios for the 2 years plus the industry. So the table should be laid out in this manner to facilitate comparison in the report and analysis. Okay, so let's look at, we talked about how you allocate time to, how you use the mark allocations to allocate the time to different parts of the question. So here's the marking key. It also tells you, it tells you how examiners go about allocating marks to each part of the question. As a student, the mark allocation for questions is normally given in each question. So you can use that one to decide on how much time you should spend, as discussed earlier on. And then 2, to assess the level of detail that you need to write. So for instance, in this question, which was question 2, December 2015, part A carried 6 marks. Yeah. So 6 marks, so the examiners allocated 2 marks for valid discussion on gearing, liquidity, and profitability. So you can see that you'd need to, once you compute the ratios, if the question is asking for 3 categories of ratios: gearing, liquidity, and profitability. So, and then the mark allocation is 6 marks. The implication is that each set of ratios carries about 2 marks. So that would be 2 for gearing, 2 for liquidity, 2 for profitability. So try and spread your effort in that manner. The other parts of the questions are also, the allocations are for part 2.1, it was 2 marks for the report. So the formatting the report carries some marks. So it's very important that you have a formal report for you to earn those 2 marks. And then for each comparative ratio, a mark was allocated. So it's important that you have all the different ratios that were required in the 3 categories of gearing, liquidity, and profitability. Then 8 marks was allocated to to compute the level of gearing, showing that this was basically the most difficult part of the question. Mark allocations also show, can also give you an idea which part of the question is the most difficult. So you normally start with the easiest parts of the question. Where the mark allocations are easier, generally they are smaller, the mark allocations are smaller, the implications are, the questions are easier. Question 2 had an allocation of 8 marks, clearly showing that it was the most challenging part of the question. Question 2-3 had 4 marks. Advantages and disadvantages, probably the easiest part of the question. Okay, so in summary, let's talk about the techniques. Some of the things that you should take away from this presentation. Time management is the poor coverage, syllabus coverage is the biggest contributor to exam failure. It's very easy to tell a poorly prepared student just from the script. They'll probably attempt 1 question out of the required 4, or they'll probably attempt, even if they have attempted several questions, they'll probably attempt maybe just 1 or 2 parts from the 4 questions that are required. Mind you, D2 financial management, all 4 questions are compulsory. You need to cover the whole syllabus. You have no choice. So the second contributing factor is time management. It's very important that you use practice time management using the Rev Kit, using the mark allocation of 1.8 per mark. Also ensure that your work is presented neatly. Examiners and markers have a lot of scripts to mark. So if your work is poorly presented, generally your script will be poorly attended to, and you might just miss out a few marks. Try, if you have your handwriting is very poor, make an effort to make your work legible. Okay, and as well as try understanding the requirements of the question. Look at the verbs. Is it an explanation, or is it a discussion which is required? Is it a listing, or is it an evaluation? Evaluation is a higher level of word than listing. If it says listing, listing, the requirement is easier. If the requirement requires explanation, it means you need to spend more time writing, because explanation means you have to write different aspects. Evaluation means you need to look at the pros and cons, look at the required question from different angles. Generally, that implies that the examiners are prepared to accept different answers. So don't miss that opportunity to score easy marks when the question requires you to evaluate, because it means the answer plan, there are several options that are required. There's no one answer. So you can state your assumptions and you might just have earned the required marks. Okay, finally, if you have difficult for computational questions, if you have difficult, try and refer to the formula sheets. They might just remind you, you might just find some hints in terms of the formulas. Okay, so verbs are detailed in the syllabus. Find time to go through this. I've put a few definitions here for your information, but they are detailed in your syllabus guide, which is provided by Zika. So some of the keywords, generally all the ways that are used by examiners are there. Things like applying, which means to demonstrate. The definitions are given so that you understand the requirements of the questions. Okay, let me just look at a few definitions that are normally quite common. Okay. One of the most common ones is analyzing. This normally comes down, is required when during computations. Analyze basically means break down or differentiate, distinguish, basically. There's also one of the common requirements is evaluation, as I've emphasized this word. Probably one of the most, at this level, is probably one of the most important keywords in financial management is evaluation. It's all inclusive. It's appraise, contrast, describe, discriminate, explanation. The word explain is included in evaluation. So familiarize yourselves with this key, very important keyword. Okay, there are also other words that are very, normally they carry small mark allocations like list. This is normally a very basic word, and the mark allocations will clearly show that not much is required. State as well, normally where the examiner is requiring just a repetition of the reproduction of the concept without any explanations, with much explanation. The word list is normally used. Yeah, other words include describe and discuss, which is a higher level or word keyword. So please familiarize yourself, as I mentioned, with the syllabus guide for these keywords. Okay, future expectations. What is going forward? What can you expect? Key is the most important fact to mention is syllabus coverage. Examiners are required to cover all parts of the syllabus, so you should expect, if a part of the syllabus is not examined, wasn't examined in the last paper, look out for some of those parts in the subsequent paper. So you're advised to look at a few past papers so that you just have an idea what hasn't been examined and then what you can expect as a student. I'm sure by now you're aware that the paper is examined quarterly, and obviously it's even possible that in future, given the pandemic, that we probably might start having some of these exams they might be computer based, as is happening in other institutions. Should also, the questions, generally students should expect, because D2 financial management has 4 compulsory questions, students should expect the questions to be integrated. Basically meaning that because the examiners are expected to prepare 4 compulsory questions to cover the whole syllabus, the only way they can cover the whole syllabus using 4 questions is to integrate the questions. So please do not ever specialize in one or two parts of the syllabus for this paper. Cover the whole syllabus. The questions are integrated as I outlined in the 2 examples that I gave. They had one question at sources of finance, group accounts, working capital in one question. So you cannot specialize because you will not be able to answer some parts of the syllabus. Okay, so basically, in a nutshell, that's what you need to look out for in terms of D2 financial management. The concept that we've covered in this presentation also cover other papers in the financial management series, which include financial management 2.5 and then 3.6. So the concepts are similar. You can use the same concepts. The syllabuses, the syllabus coverage is similar, but of course with some advancements in the other papers. Thank you for your time and good luck.